I can't tell you how grateful I am for this day to have arrived. Unfortunately, it took disastrous findings within the VA to get to this point, and it's a step in the right direction. I can tell you as a physician, I face-to-face asked Secretary Shinseki 3 times if I could go in with a team into the VAs and into the ORs and discuss where the inefficiencies are and how we could do things better. And every time I was told, yeah, we'll do that. It never happened. But I am encouraged because right before all this broke, we set up a meeting with the 4 doctors that are on this committee, bipartisan, with several of the administrators, with the VA, to talk about efficiency and access to care and quality to care. And, you know, there's a difference in different systems, right? If you have a system where many people that work there are saying it's not my job, that's a problem. And what you have mentioned many times today, I couldn't agree with more, and that's the physician input. If they can have the input of how things can be better, you've got to go that route. And the other difference is the difference in responsibility in private practice and in other settings, which sometimes the VA. If I had a patient that missed an appointment, I want to know why. And also if they were post-op or whatever, I tell them, no, they've got to be here. I've got to see them. It's my responsibility. And that tends to be missing if you don't know who's coming or going. And measures such as standard of care are great. Obviously, we need to do that. But if you're seeing 1 patient a day and you're giving outstanding care, it doesn't mean very much. And you also have to look at the access to care and the efficiency of operations. And so what you're saying today, I think, is spot on. The problem I've found within the VA system is you had too many people who don't know what they don't know, because they've always been in that system. So they've never seen anything different. So they think they're doing something great, but they don't know that others are doing it much better. And that's where we need the outside input and the best practices. We're hearing a lot of the same things here today, and I think that's great. Ronald Reagan once said, if you have a message that's important, tell it over and over again. And to me, the best practices and efficiencies are driven by choice, which we've heard so many times today. You know, when a patient is a liability rather than an asset, we have a problem. And patients need to have choice, because for me, my level of success and how well I was doing is by how many wanted to see me when they know they have a choice. And that's really where we need to be driven. What was mentioned before, too, you know, the ACA and throughout, we're really not addressing the doctor shortage. Because if you don't have providers, and not just doctors, it could be nurses, PAs, et cetera, you need to address those shortages in our country, and oftentimes in the rural areas especially. So those are the other things we need to focus on. I'm pleased right now that the door is open for change. And everybody here is open for change, because I didn't know this day would come. And again, I'm sorry it took what it took to get to this day, but we've got to drive on. I like what Mr. Walsh says, let's get the big idea out there. And we can do that. One thing I found interesting several months ago is I asked Dr. Petzel, I said, if the VA system was reimbursed at 105% of Medicare rates, would you be in the black? And he said yes. Some of the doctors on this committee politely disagreed that they'd be able to pay their bills and be in the black with the system that they're running. From your observations, what is your opinion on that?
I really don't have any data. I have not looked at that. I have no idea. Lift up the hood on the question. When you compare yourself to yourself, there's probably not a lot of accuracy that you can get. And so when you take a look at those organizations in the VA that actually do submit data to the publicly reported databases, you have a way of measuring against others. And it's not a private sector versus public sector conversation. But when we continue to, whether it's patient perception, they use a tool called SHEP versus HCAHPS that you would see in the private sector. When you see that those just simply don't submit the data, the outcomes data that we talk about, we're actually stuck in this vicious cycle of, as you said, you don't know what you don't know because you're comparing yourself only to yourself. It'd be like taking a blood pressure of a patient without any gradations on the blood pressure cuff. You're just kind of guessing, well, it's that high.
I'd like to address that question, too. According to MedPAC, Medicare used to pay 92 cents for every dollar of care delivered. After the Affordable Care Act, they're now paying less than that. And the reason I raise that is that one provision of the bill that you're going to be considering this week says that civilian doctors who take the choice card will be paid not more than the Medicare rate. And so it's important to alert everyone to what you've probably heard from your constituents back home, that finding a doctor to take Medicare is getting harder and harder.
Yes.